Hey, Steve. I'm not either, but I just sent you the link on Facebook. Sweet. There you are. Awesome. All right, I'll get off the phone. It's creating feedback.
Okay. I've hung up as well.
There we go. That's much better.
Yeah, that's cool. You're just a Leon County logo, though.
It's slightly altered. We got we got the. Oh yeah, that's because I don't have a webcam at the moment.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so I'm just the talking pulsating icon at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, this will be rectified as I get more equipment. But um, let's see. Besides, I wanted to focus on the guest anyway. So
Okay.
let's see. I'm gonna. All right. So the stream is always going to lag a few minutes, so that's why I'm starting it a few minutes beforehand. And
Okay.
so really, we'll want to give it a good 5 to 10 minute window after the starting time to actually get started. But in the meantime, when we get viewers joining, we can let me yeah, I'm gonna publish the.
There we go. No, it doesn't look so messy.
Yep. There we go.
You can hear me okay without any problem?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. It's great, actually.
Okay. I'm using a clip mic, so I'm glad that that's working out.
Yeah. So it's a lapel mic.
Yeah, actually. But I've got it down on my breast pocket, so I was
Good.
worried about it picking it up, but it's working. It's working good.
And we've picked up our first viewer. I haven't even sent the confirmation out yet. Hello, viewer, whoever you are. We can use the chat here. Let's see. Let's see. All right. Trying to get the link so I can post that in the LCLEC Facebook. Links. All right. Here comes the Facebook link.
It's my first time on Google Hangouts.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat little program.
Seems to be a little bit more clear than Skype is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I usually do these things either through Google Hangout, Twitch, or Hitbox TV. But this seemed the most appropriate. We're starting to get in some viewers now. It's 7 o'clock on my
That's
clock.
what I have.
Yeah, but that probably won't. Like I said, this is on a few minutes delay. It'll take whoever's listed or whoever's watching a few minutes to get that. So, let's see. Anybody viewing the chat, if you want to say hello, just put a shout out in the chat, and we'll get started in a few minutes here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So, for everybody listening, you are in the Leon County Libertarian Executive Committee town hall stream, and as you can probably see, Bill is not with us right now, and I'm going to address that first off. First of all, thank everybody for your questions. It's really nice to see the feedback. Bill was in a car accident last week, and he's had some complications from that today that will prevent him from being here. We are rescheduling for later in the week. In the meantime, I've got Steve Edmond here, and he's going to talk about Bill's campaign. So for those of you with a family, like myself, hard to reschedule. When we do this later in the week, it will be recorded to YouTube, and you can watch it at your leisure. But the town hall is postponed. We will be talking with Steve Edmond about the Hemp for Water campaign tonight, and let's get started on that right now. So, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the Hemp for Water campaign, the overall goals, and what it hopes to accomplish?
Sure, sure. Thanks for having me on first off, and again, Bill sends his apologies and his regrets for not being able to make it this evening. He did have his back spasm up from the car accident that he was in earlier this week, and for those of us that unfortunately have had to deal with back problems, they tend to sneak up all at once and cause all sorts of mayhem when you least expect it. So we are shooting for a quick reschedule on this, and we'll get that information out to everybody as soon as possible. But to go into hemp for water is it's a baseline for discussion, really. It's an answer to a question that my colleagues and I in One Florida Foundation used to get quite often, which is how are you going to pay for it? And that question was always put forth to us after we had finished talking about one form or another of water infrastructure problems in the state of Florida. And some of the areas that we used to discuss on a regular basis were the oysters in Apalachicola, nations of springs from northern Florida down through central Florida, saltwater intrusion in Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa, all of our major coastal cities. The issues of the runoff and heavy rainfalls going from the Central Florida region down through the Kissimmee River into Lake Okeechobee, and then ultimately being discharged through fragile estuaries on either coast. And then just shortages and surpluses in general, combined with an entire state of water flow, ultimately ending up causing problems to our reefs in Key Biscayne and in the Keys. So we have a lot of major water infrastructure problems in the state of Florida, and the way that we typically handle them as a government is to say, okay, well, these are huge problems and huge projects. How are we going to fund it? Typically, the state of Florida has relied on or worked in partnership in some cases with the federal government to do a cost sharing to tackle large infrastructure projects. A great example or something to think about when we're looking at this is like the Everglades restorations. Now, I don't know how much you all know about Everglades restoration, but it started way before I was born, in the early 40s, and still hasn't gotten much ground, and still hasn't accomplished the goal of restoring or even saving the Everglades, but it has spent billions of dollars in a lot of different capacities and a lot of different started projects that were never finished. So one of the things that we're concerned about, as libertarians, is wasting taxpayers' money and doing projects that aren't efficient and doing projects that aren't ultimately going to solve the problem that we're working on. So we are apprehensive about letting the federal government continue to spearhead or champion, or not champion, but to administer these projects. Another problem with doing that is that I wish I could shut that off in the background. I can't. I'm sorry. Another problem with doing that is that we give up a certain degree of sovereignty to the federal government because a majority of water, particularly water conveyance and flood control um, projects, are done through the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Army Corps of Engineers then supersedes all of our protections, including federal protections, and supersedes what happens to our water flow and our water infrastructures. And that is the truth for over 90% of the state, including some of the challenges that were discussed a couple minutes ago in terms of, the 7 or 8 large concerns in the state. So we have a situation where these projects are billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars. In fact, if you were to add up all of the cost in today's dollars, if you were able to somehow magically complete all those projects in today's dollars, in today's times, it would cost about $50 billion to do it. In addition to that, we looked at a water infrastructure improvements project, which basically constitutes storage areas and water pipelining that would allow us to move the excess waters to places where we're experiencing too much water and move it to places where we don't have enough water, which is a lot of the problems in the state of Florida. We have too much water in many places and not enough in others. So what we want to do is have a way to move this water around. And this is a huge public works project that's going to create a lot of jobs and create a lot of opportunity, and can be done so through the competition of a private market if we set it up correctly. But we estimate that that would cost anywhere between $1 billion and $10 billion. So because this is a discussion piece, we start at $10 billion. So we're looking at a total situation of $60 billion that Hemp for Water is discussing. And how can you get to $60 billion and cover the water infrastructure needs of the state of Florida and do it in an efficient manner and do it without hurting anybody else?
Hey,
Well,
Steve.
yes.
Let me stop you right there. I noticed some people have come and gone since we started the stream, and I also wanted to ask you a question. For those of you who just joined the stream, Bill did have to reschedule later in the week due to medical complications caused by a car accident last week. Your questions will be answered in the town hall, but it will be later this week, and we will get that data to you as soon as we can. Steve, so for Hemp for Water, let's break that down a little bit word by word, because a lot of people colloquially associate hemp with a lot of different things. So let's start with the legal definition of hemp as relates to the Hemp for Water plan.
Okay, great. Thanks for guiding me in there. I tend to get a little too descriptive when I get into what is hemp for water. So hemp, when we're talking about this, would be any cannabis that has 0.3% THC or less. That's the accepted definition of what industrial hemp is. You would literally be able to smoke the whole field and not get high at all, because there is no narcotic value in hemp. And that's one of the components of Hemp for Water. In order for it to work, Bill needs to be elected to Attorney General so that he can make good on his promise to take industrial hemp off of the schedule, off the controlled substance list schedule altogether, which would open up a huge amount of economy. About $9.6 billion overnight is our estimate, just by opening up the markets of industrial hemp, which is 0.3 THC or less.
Yeah. Also, something I'd like to add there. Currently, this version of hemp is Schedule 1. Am I right?
Correct. All cannabis is currently Schedule 1. Yes.
And Schedule 1, I have a list of Schedule 1 stuff here. That puts it in the same family as heroin, LSD, MDMA, and ecstasy, just to name a few.
Correct. Schedule 1 generally means that there is no accepted medicinal value and there is a high potential for abuse and endangerment to the people that are using it. Is generally what Schedule 1 classification is reserved for.
I would
This one, go ahead.
I also just wanted to point out that as far as I'm aware, cocaine is currently Schedule 2, which means it has a wider medical acceptance than marijuana currently does, including the 0.3% industrial hemp.
Correct. Yes, in fact, there are some dentists that still prescribe cocaine, which is why it is Schedule 2, because the argument is that it has a medicinal value, and therefore it stayed as a Schedule 2 as opposed to going up to a Schedule 1, even though we're all well aware that there's been several problems with cocaine, health-wise and death-wise, as compared to cannabis. But when we're talking about industrial hemp has literally trace amounts of narcotics in it, 0.3 THC or less. And when I made the joke earlier that you could smoke the whole field and get high, I was pretty serious about that. You would die of smoke inhalation and destroy your lungs with just smoke before it did anything else to you. It has no it has no narcotic value whatsoever.
Okay. Now, when so we've got the hemp part down. Now, for water, that means you're basically using the industrial hemp. I'm assuming the taxes that will be collected as a funding mechanism for water programs.
That's correct. Although hemp is an excellent crop and more environmentally responsible because it uses less water and it actually takes out the bad things from the soil and puts good things back in. The water part of hemp for water is based on the idea or the suggestion that we would exempt industrial hemp business activities from traditional taxes. So corporate taxes, sales taxes, and that would have to be decided upon, ultimately by the people making the legislation. But we would suggest to exempt them from traditional taxes, and in its place put an excise tax, being hemp for water. And that excise tax would say, okay, any activity or any revenue that's generated through this excise tax will be allocated specifically for water infrastructure improvements. So you're eliminating what I call the general slush fund of where most taxes go to from business activity, which is to the general funding of the legislature, and then they split it up in their budgetary process, and it goes to whoever's pet projects are on the top of the list. This would avoid that because the excise tax would allocate specifically that the revenues that would occur from this specific industry would go to water infrastructure improvements.
Okay, cool. Yeah, what the Florida water problems are kind of close for me. I live in Leon County, and I actually have lived in Leon County for my entire life. But I went to school in Wakulla, and I spend a lot of recreational time down there. And I know every time Tampa gets really, really low on water, they start trying to knock on Wakulla Springs' door. And
Yep.
yeah, that's an issue close to home for me.
Well, and of course, Tampa was running out of freshwater supplies a long time ago, which created that whole desalination debacle that occurred. I guess it's been over 5 years now. But water resources in general are going to be or should be the foremost of our minds in terms of policies and issues that we're concerned about. If you look at the consumption levels and the growth levels of the state of Florida, if you keep everything at the same rate that we've kept everything for the last 20 years, and we continue that over to the next 20 years, we're looking at somewhere between 2030 and 2040 of being out of water, drinking water and resource water. If we enact infrastructure improvements and we're able to harness the billions of gallons of a day that we're literally flushing to tide, and we're able to move and manipulate our surpluses to our droughts, then not only could we sustain ourselves and help keep our aquifer levels up and help combat saltwater intrusion, but we might actually be in a position where we could be a net supplier of water, in 30 or 40 years, to the point where we no longer have to sue the state of Georgia over water coming down from Lanier. We can just go ahead and sell them water because we got enough,
That
and that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, that actually leads me into a little bit of a segue. Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here.
Sure.
But that desalinization becomes really efficient only when you, and I shouldn't use the word efficient, but practical when you start talking about nuclear power. Does Bill have any positions on nuclear power?
You know what? I think that I think you did put me on the spot there, and
Sorry.
I think we should let Bill answer that particular one.
Fair enough.
I will go back and say that I think that you can get valuable desalinization if you use solar. Your idea that you can't get desalinization to work except for nuclear would have probably been correct about 10 years ago, before the last 10 years of advancements in solar technology. But I believe that you could do solar technology desalinization efficiently today, and be able to avoid that question altogether. But I'm gonna let Bill answer that question, because that's an important one, and I would rather people hear it from him. We've discussed it, and it's one that we'll have to leave as a teaser to make sure that people tune in to his town hall.
Yes. Speaking of which, that's a great little segue. I've noticed a little more turnover in the viewers. As Steve mentioned, Bill is not here at the moment, and I'm just going to reiterate for the people who just joined the stream that Bill has had some medical complications from an automobile accident he was in a week ago, and he unfortunately was not able to join us this evening. We are waiting for a reschedule. Your questions will be answered. We appreciate the questions you have sent in. But that will be scheduled later in the week. You will see an update posted on the LCLEC, which is the Leon County Libertarian Executive Committee's Facebook, as soon as we have details on that. But it will be later this week.
Awesome. Awesome. But to follow up a little bit on that, Josh, Bill is a very, very environmentally minded individual. He's been involved in active stewardship since the early 70s. And a lot, like a lot of other libertarians, his philosophy is to go do and not talk about. So I look forward to him being able to express more so those sentiments for you at the next town hall. But did you want to talk some more about how Hemp for Water works, or what the funding could be, or did you have any other specifics on that, or
Um, one
did you want
more.
me to just go for it?
uh, so we've got hemp for water, 0.3% THC hemp becomes descheduled, becomes a funding mechanism for water-specific projects in the state of Florida. Have you thought? I'm not sure if this is a fair question for you or if it's something Bill might need to answer, but have you thought about any? Are there any projects close to home that you have in particular that you were thinking, or that Bill was thinking about when he drafted Hemp for Water?
Well, Hemp for Water is covering some specific areas of concern, not specific projects, because I think that each area of concern is going to end up requiring multiple projects and multiple fixes. We've discussed a few of them in brief. One of them is up in your area with Apalachicola, with the oysters. That's a situation that has to be addressed. It's a fairly big industry for the state of Florida, but more importantly, there are several small communities that that rely entirely on their existence of what's going on with Apalachicola. Not to mention, we should really try and save the last major part of our oyster industry in the state. So that is going to require a lot of irrigation and a water source supply that currently we're suing the state of Georgia over. It's literally going to go to the Supreme Court here shortly. So that's one area of concern. Another area of concern is the springs. There are 37 identified springs in the state of Florida that are considered in critical condition, which means that they are either experiencing a lack of water supply to the point that they're reaching a point of critical concern, or they're experiencing pollution and an overabundance of exotics and bacterias that are causing problems in the ecosystem that's causing an area of critical concern. Each one of those could be considered an individual project. So that's a lot there. Then you have the Lake Okeechobee discharges. That's something that's going to require a lot of creative thinking and figuring out how Central Florida holds on to its stormwater discharge and keeping its water for its own resources and secondary sources, as opposed to just flushing it down the Kissimmee ditch. And then again, those billions of gallons a day go out to tide through fragile estuaries, and we want to be able to protect in those fragile estuaries and clean that water up and store it for future use. And then the saltwater intrusion problems in every major city, those are all going to require engineering fixes and volumes of water to combat the pressures of the saltwater coming in. So those are also all going to be individual projects. And then anything that we can clean up and divert in terms of too much fresh polluted water hitting the saltwater reefs, we need to work on that as well. So I mean, we're facing some pretty monumental water issues in the state of Florida, and they all have to do with really mismanagement. Not really criticizing any of our water management facilities. It's just the fact that we haven't looked at it as a holistic kind of endeavor. We haven't really, prior to now, started considering stormwater as a potential resource. We haven't, prior to now, considered, well, we're flushing all this water out from our excess in our deluge, when we could really be using that to irrigate our fields or get it up and irrigate our oysters. So it's really kind of a new concept to look at this holistically and think of it in long-term scope as opposed to how much water do I need today, and that's really the difference.
Okay. From there, I'm gonna actually stop asking you about things that aren't on your directly on your you're not directly responsible for, and let's get into Common Core for a second. How can the AG help with Common Core?
Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of lawsuits involved with Common Core, and the AG is going to have a lot of influence in terms of policy, and influence in terms of what the state does and does not do. I think that's where that the Attorney General's position specifically is going to have the most influence over Common Core. This idea of whether or not school boards should be able to determine, for their county, whether or not Common Core is even allowed in their county. Depending on what the AG feels, that's going to really determine the outcome of that legal argument, and how the state of Florida approaches that will be determined on the AG. And to anticipate the next question, Bill is for keeping education as close to the parents as possible, which means that a majority of the power in education should start with the parents, then flow out to the school, then flow out to the school board, then flow to the state, and not much need for the federal government to be getting involved in those decisions that are so close to home. His overall philosophy on Common Core is that if a community decides that it's not a good idea for them, then that community should have the right to make that decision.
And conversely, if that community decides it's a good fit for them, they should be able to make that decision, but that it's their decision. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, yes. I would agree with your observation there. Yes.
Okay. Now one of the things that's always intrigued me with Common Core as a libertarian issue is that Common Core is the way it's implemented is another teaching to the test thing. Now, I know a lot of teachers here in Leon County. My mother is a teacher. She teaches in Wakulla County, and basically teaching to the test was a really, really big problem when it was Jeb Bush doing it with FCAT. And now it's a really, really good thing now that the money from the standardized testing is flowing in the other direction. And I always thought that to be a pretty untenable position. I've opposed teaching to the test as a matter of form the whole way through, but I thought that was an interesting thing to see happen. Is a bunch of teachers who couldn't wait to have Jeb Bush's head over teaching to the test through FCAT are now thinking they now think Common Core is great.
Well, it's a matter of where it comes from, right? My biggest concern with Common Core is that it was developed in private rooms by five publishers of testing materials and of testing schemes and packages. So it's very disturbing to me that a very small group of special interests have been able to manipulate the federal influence to push this on the states. That's my own personal opinion on it. And teaching to a test is never a good idea at all. The idea of the idea that we can homogenize even within a state, much less within the entire country, the teaching mantras and mores and traditions for different communities is ludicrous. I'm sorry, people are going to learn differently in Seattle as they are to Louisiana, as they are to Orlando, as they are to Miami. I mean, the difference between Orlando and Miami is going to be big, much less the difference between Miami and somewhere in the Midwest. It's just a matter of each community has its own set of attributes, its own set of challenges, and should be really making their decisions about their curriculum. And if they decide that this federal standardization is best for their kids, then, as you mentioned before, that's their decision. But I see a lot of manipulation and money manipulation happening here, at the expense of good teachers and at the expense of students at the bottom of the spectrum and at the top of the spectrum. Because again, we're homogenizing. We're going for mediocrity. We're not going for excellence, which is very concerning to me.
Okay. Yeah, I share those concerns. Moving on to a different part of Bill's platform, LGBT issues. Now, that's a place that I know the AG has a lot of influence over. Can you describe that for me?
Well, Bill has been on the forefront of these particular issues since the election started, and he actually made a comment at the beginning of the election that by the time we got to the end of it, it'll be pretty much decided. And he was right. And he was talking about, of course, the conflict between our state constitutional amendment and the latest ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, stating that basically our state constitutional amendment is is null and void, and that equal marriage is going to be allowed. Bill's position would have been, first of all, I'm not wasting the state of Florida's money on this, because the Supreme Court has trumped in this, and it has done so not just in one area, but I think it was six different areas. It was either 5 or 6 different areas of agreement, making for almost a unanimous consent that this was indeed going to be the law of the land. So therefore, it would be an incredible waste of money to even challenge it, irrespective of, as a libertarian, Bill firmly believes that the government should not be involved in anybody's personal relationships or decisions.
I want to go back to something you said there. For those of us not really familiar with how the Attorney General's office works, you mentioned not wasting the state of Florida's money on that. Could you elaborate on that part of it a little bit?
Well, basically, the state of Florida was in a position that it was defending what was elected by the citizens of the state of Florida in the constitutional amendment that was passed that said, we're denying same-sex marriages. As the Attorney General, and this is where the power of the Attorney General comes into play, as the Attorney General, that individual has the ability to say, okay, well, I am going to defend the state's position on this, and I'm going to fight this issue, and spend a lot of resources doing so. In fact, the current incumbent has had 5 or 6 different appeals occurring, and she's lost every one of them, and she's going to lose every one of them. And instead of withdrawing the state's position, i.e., spending our money fighting for the state's position, she's keeping it there, making her statement against same-sex marriage and making it a political thing instead of an efficient, smart decision for the state of Florida. So Bill's position would have been, irrespective of his political ideology, which is that equality means equality. The business perspective or the AG perspective or the policy directive there for him would have been, this is a fight that I can't win the state of Florida's money on fighting for something that has already been decided. Did that answer that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good.
I knew the answer. I just wanted to steer that into a more voter-conscious discussion. So basically, to sum up what you just said, the state of Florida's position, which is that gay marriage is currently not allowed, is being defended pretty hopelessly in federal courts at the moment, and the state of Florida is spending a lot of money on what is essentially a political fight.
A political fight that won't be won, can't be won at this point. There's
correct.
The chances of that being won are extremely low.
Okay. Let's move on to Bill's position on gun rights.
Okay.
Now, anybody who's heard of the Libertarian Party and hasn't been totally misled on what it stands for should know this, but I would like to take a few minutes to talk about it. So,
okay.
And how the office of the Attorney General pertains to that.
Okay. I'll let you ask your questions and then answer from there.
All right. So basically, the overall question is, as the Attorney General, what would Bill have in his purview regarding gun rights? Now, I know specifically there's a fight over preemption in a lot of cities at the moment.
Okay. His point of view overall is, of course, to defend the Constitution and defend the Second Amendment right as written. And he takes a very literal interpretation of the Second Amendment right. When we drill down to the state of Florida, he would like to see the adjustments that are occurring in Stand Your Ground legislation and the expansion of that. He's appalled by the by the young lady that is looking at doing time for firing a warning shot in her own home. And there are a number of pieces of legislation, including Stand Your Ground and a couple others, where he thinks that adjustments could be helpful to clean it up, which is why which is why he has his position that he has on open carry. A lot of people hear open carry and start to go, oh no, Wild West, and we don't want that. But it's really more of a housekeeping item, in the fact that currently our concealed laws, the way that they're written, are very open to police interpretation that are not very favorable to the citizens. Examples would be the gentleman in north central Florida, mid Florida, that was pulled over for a minor traffic violation, and was leaning to get his registration and so forth, and his concealed was shown because his shirt lifted up, and then he was subsequently, drug out of the vehicle and face planted into the concrete. These types of things are unacceptable, but they're within the letter of the laws that are written, and that's where Bill has gotten into his policy directives or his issue directives with handguns or with any guns, is trying to clean up the discrepancies in the law. So his open carry philosophy is more for trying to make more sense of what the concealed should be. If that clears up his position on handguns,
Yeah.
or on
Now,
guns in general.
I wanted to go back to a specific phrase you said there, and that is Wild West. We've heard that one before.
Right.
In Florida, we heard that when Florida decided it would become a shall issue state for concealed carry, and also
Right.
over the recent law about transporting weapons during emergency situations. Wild West was used in both of those instances and has
Right.
categorically failed to materialize.
Well, and that's what the fear mongers do, is they try and catch on to a little piece of a policy or an idea, and exaggerate it into whatever spin is going to freak people out. Bill is for common sense. Common sense protections of everybody's individual liberties and rights, and he wants to make sure that people aren't inhibited from being able to protect themselves just because of where we live. One of the great cartoons that we didn't get done, or one of the great campaign things that we were working on that never really materialized, we were trying to, was how do you protect yourself at the beach? Guy or girl, but it's gonna be even harder for a girl. How do you protect yourself at the beach? How do you take your weapon to the beach under our current laws?
Very carefully.
Yeah, you really can't. So that limits your ability to protect yourselves. Another strong limitations that occurs to the state of Florida is a federal incursion, which basically says that there is a mile limit around ports of entry, around airports, around ports of call, around major transportation hubs, that say that you're prohibited from protecting yourself in these areas. Well, in the state of Florida, that pretty much eliminates a large part of the state, because we're overlapped by those boundaries. Once you start looking at the proximity of international airports and international ports and transportation hubs.
Yeah.
So those are some other places where Bill would like to do housekeeping, and make things a lot more commonsensical and protective for the citizens to enable their own rights to protect themselves.
One of the things that I consider tangential but related to that issue is the prevalence of police militarization and the increase in that trend over the last couple of years, even over the last decade, certainly, but the last 1 or 2 years has been especially egregious. As
Yes.
now, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong here, um, President Obama recently, not well, recently as in his presidency recently, uh, made it a lot easier for local police departments to get surplus military equipment.
It's my understanding that and I don't know if it's coming directly from the White House or not, but it's my understanding that there have been some pieces of equipment that have actually been given to different local police agencies. Very scary when you start to look at police forces that look a lot like the military.
Those were actually MRAPs, MRAPs. I don't know what that acronym stands for. I'm sure there's somebody in this stream that does. But basically, they're armored personnel carriers,
Right.
and I know of several towns across the country where those were given to the police departments for the cost of maintenance. Essentially, they
Right.
were just handed
There you
over.
go.
Yeah, from a political perspective, it would be. I mean, how do you not accept that? I mean, at the very least, that's going to look good in a parade. And when all you have is a hammer.
Right. Well, but it scares me, because I don't know. Lately, I've been equating our existence to, Soviet Union 1980s, and there's a lot of things that are really starting to scare me because um, I was starting to see a lot of similarities. And one of the things that they did was make sure that their town halls had active military components to them.
Yeah.
Um,
I wanted to
those
talk about a story in Georgia real quick on the police militarization thing. Recently, there was a verdict handed out in a case where a Georgian SWAT team who had arrived at the wrong residence threw a flashbang into a baby's crib and
Yeah.
critically injured that child, who was in
Right.
the ICU for a long time. If a citizen had done that, I mean, jail,
Yep.
jail money.
We attempted murder. Oh yeah, attempted murder, civil suits, the whole 9 yards. It would have been a mess, and there's absolutely no reason why the government should get away with that. If that occurs and it was truly an accident, then they're still truly liable, even though it was truly an accident. One of the horrible things about that is that was a result of the war on drugs, and that's another casualty of the war on drugs, which is a miserably failed policy that does nothing but cost the citizens of this country billions of dollars, and in some situations people's lives over creating organized crime. We've picked up a slogan on the campaign, which is if a politician supports prohibition, then they're supporting organized crime, and we take that pretty seriously. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up, Josh, is I think that the whole militarization of the police department has been predicated or sold to as okay because of this war on drugs. And it's been passed off as this war on drugs, and the war on drugs is really nothing more than a war on citizens, and causes way more harms than it does solutions. The idea that police officers can come onto your property and shoot your dog because they smelled a particular type of plant burning, or they thought they saw something in your tomato garden that had more leaves than it should. Um, that's not a free America. That's not liberty.
No,
That's that's something that I'm not for.
yeah, you're right. And I totally agree with you. Now, I would say over the last decade, for sure, the amount of militarization in the police has closely followed the ramp up on the war on drugs. But it seems to me in the last 1 or 2 years, it's just totally eclipsed that. Um, do you have any opinions on that? Are you seeing any data otherwise? But to me, it feels like the militarization has started outpacing the war on drugs growth and mission creep.
No, I would agree with you there, but I think that the war on drugs was the foot in the door,
Absolutely
um,
agree.
to allow this to be somehow acceptable to the citizenry, somehow palatable, somehow manageable. I think it's a psychological thing, that 20 years ago, there's no way that I think the population would have even stood for what happened after the Boston bombing, and what occurred there with the militarization in the streets. Irrespective of that horrible event, I don't think that the citizenry would have stood for it. And it's all the other major component of this is the Homeland Security and the events that occurred after September 11th, and the Patriot Act and the NDAA, and all of these consolidation of agencies and powers under Homeland Security. And that dovetails with this ramp up of militarization. um, and frankly, it's concerning to me, and I know it concerns a lot of other people as well. That it seems to be that these forces aren't really getting ready for anything outside of the country.
Now, I'm going to date myself as a youngin here, but I was about 10 years old, and it was roughly the mid 90s or early 90s when I became politically active, which is aware, I should say, not active, but that's actually pretty young, but so am I. Uh, my point is that the police militarization thing, it's always been weird to me because the police are civilians. If there are procedures for declaring martial law and using the National Guard, but what we saw happening in Boston was nothing like I've ever seen before. The police declared martial law in Boston.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of procedures were completely ignored, including the Constitution, and on several different levels. And it seemed to come from a place that wasn't your traditional hierarchy, or where it should have come from, to see that kind of military action in civilian streets. Martial law was effectively declared, and nobody said word one. Nobody said a peep. Over a kid that was found 3 days later by a civilian.
Yeah. Do you
You know,
think do you think that by giving police more military-like responsibilities that we are helping create in their own minds that they are above the law?
I think it's dangerous. I think it's a slippery slope. I mean, that's a personal opinion for me. I think that police officers should not even have that burden or that responsibility. I mean, that's something that's to be reserved for the National Guard and for the military. Our police force should be protective servants, like they were designed to be. To serve and to protect, not to crush and to destroy. Which is really the mantra that seems to be occurring. And I have a number of friends that are Leos, and have them in every level of service that you can imagine. And for the most part, I think that especially dedicated and long-term officers would agree with me. I mean, because all that you're doing by putting a police officer in that situation is endangering their life even further. I mean, you're just making their job that much more difficult, that much more dangerous, and that much more perilous. Should they ever have to make the decision of following orders, or helping their neighbors,
Yep. Two
because
things.
that's what we're getting to.
Yeah, two things. One, for those of you who don't know the alphabet soup, Leos are law enforcement officers,
Sorry.
and yeah, that's okay. And I'd like to tie back that entire conversation into why we're here, which is all this stuff we've talked about, police militarization and rights violations in other states. How does the Florida Attorney General, how are they able to protect us from that?
Well, that's a great question, Josh, and one that's misconstrued a lot. A lot of times, people think that the attorney general can go directly after police corruption, which is unfortunately not the case. Bill would love to be able to go directly after it and initiate that stuff, but really that's the the inspector general's job, which is going to come down from the governor's branch, and their main focus is to go after corruption and to go after abuse of power within our police forces. Um, the where Bill can have influence again is as a policymaker and as the top policymaker for the state's position. So where Bill has influence is helping to determine what the state's opinion is going to be with regard to certain occurrences. It's a situation where Bill is going to be in charge of all the prosecutors and in charge of the actions of the state or defending the actions of the state. If Bill agrees with the actions of the state, then as the political part of his position, he's going to be more inclined to concentrate on that. If he disagrees with the actions of the state, or doesn't think that it's prudent for the state to go in that direction, then he has the resources of how the plaintiff or the defendant reacts depending on where the state of Florida is in the equation.
All right, so to pull an example, let's say we had an incident in Florida, much like in Georgia, where police or military-style equipment was used inappropriately and an infant got hurt. Let's say that family decides to press charges against that organization. Would Bill be involved in that?
Yeah, actually, if that happened in the state of Florida, to answer your question accurately, Bill's office would be responsible for defending the state's actions. So, Bill would have a decision to make there as to how vigorously the state of Florida fought that lawsuit,
If at all.
if at all, correctly. Correct.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have about 6 minutes here. So one more thing. Recently, and this is going back to Second Amendment issues, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts on this because it's actually been more than a year now, I believe. Willie Meggs was involved in a case where a local sheriff decided not to prosecute a gun violation for basically a matter of process involving a routine traffic stop. Are you familiar with that, or am I going to have to Google that real quick and get the details?
Well, if this is the one, are you talking about the sheriff in Liberty County?
Yes.
And where the governor actually overstepped his boundaries and removed a constitutional officer
Yes,
from his
absolutely.
position? Yeah, Bill sided with the sheriff on that one.
All right,
Let's
now,
make it
now
short.
to make that
Short
to
and
make that
sweet.
short and sweet, yeah. Now, do you remember more details of that situation though for the audience that we do have?
Um,
Or
I think the way that went was that and I think and I have to go back and brush up on this too, Josh. Basically, what happened was that the sheriff made a call that was going to be not going forward on Willie Meggs because of procedural, like you illustrated, and it caused such an uproar. Um, that the sheriff was being supported by Second Amendment folks in saying that he did the right thing and allowing an individual to retain their rights, and a lot of other people, including a Republican governor, came down on him saying that he failed to do his job and arrest Mr. Meggs for I think it was irresponsibly or improperly brandishing a weapon. I believe was
I have to start right. Willie Meggs was the attorney general for that region, or
oh
attorney. Yeah.
the prosecuting attorney.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
see, he would have been the DA, the district attorney.
There you go.
Okay, right. So and he was trying to. I'm not clear on the specifics, Josh.
All right. Well, let's go something
Presume
we
it. I
can.
just know what happened to the sheriff.
Well, yeah, let's go into something we can get specific on. One thing you mentioned earlier that I wanted to devote a little extra time to, and since we have a few minutes, I decided to do it now. You mentioned the changes for the warning shot changes to stand your ground. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And
Well,
what caused it?
yeah, what caused it, and I forget the young lady's name, was that there was a home invasion that was occurring, and uh, she uh, she ended up firing warning shots and scaring the intruder, and then was charged with illegally discharging a weapon within city limits or county limits or something like that. To the point of and received a pretty serious charge in result of it. She's looking at real time for basically defending her domicile, her house, and it's because of a section of Stand Your Ground that basically and I'd have to get Bill to clarify this, but it basically says that you have a right to defend yourself, you have a right to do this, and you have a right to to go through with self defense, but there's some sort of contradiction in the law that because she fired a warning shot, she's now being held criminally responsible for firing a weapon within city limits, and is not protected by the Stand Your Ground statute as it's written. Um,
If I recall correctly, it has something to do with the clause that says that stand your ground does not apply to somebody who is in the process of committing a crime. So, if I understand that correctly, and I really should be letting Bill answer this, it was because she fired the shot in the air, she became in the process of committing a crime, and stand your ground no longer apply.
I believe you are correct there, and that would be one that I would encourage you to bring back up to Bill, because I know that he can much more appropriately answer it than I'm doing. Um, my understanding of it is that there was an inconsistency in Stand Your Ground that is causing her to have this legal problem, and that would be the biggest fix to Stand Your Ground that he would make. Other than that issue, he's a supporter of the law. He thinks that it's in the right direction, and it helps protect people's rights to protect themselves. But he acknowledges that there's obviously a huge problem with it if this young lady is going to be facing major time for defending herself, because she fired a warning shot. That's something that that's a great example of what Bill likes to go after. Inconsistencies that could really put innocent citizens in a huge amount of legal jeopardy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're out of time, so quick closing statement.
Quick closing statement is there's a week left. Please go talk to all your friends, your families, your neighbors. look up the website. Send them to the website. That's www.billw2014.com. And if you want to learn more about the specifics of hemp for water, that's www.hemp4water.com. And thanks very much for allowing me to stand in Bill's stead. And he'll be here to answer all your questions sometime this week. We'll figure that out probably tonight or first thing tomorrow, and we'll get all of that information out to everybody as soon as we can.
All right, I put those links you mentioned in the group chat.
Great.
For everybody watching, thank you so much for coming. Steve, thank you so much for standing in for Bill. You did a wonderful job. This is the Leon County Libertarian Executive Committee live signing out. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks very much.